It was past midnight when the sound of the door slowly creaking open woke me up. At first, I thought it was just the wind. Our house was old, and sometimes the doors made strange noises at night. But then I heard footsteps, quiet, careful footsteps moving across the floor of my room. My heart started beating faster. I slowly opened my eyes, trying to see through the darkness, and that's when I realized someone had actually entered my room. What happened next completely changed the way I looked at my family, and especially at my stepbrother. Before I tell you the full story, you need to understand something about my life. A few years ago, my mom remarried after my parents separated. It wasn't easy for me at first. Adjusting to a new house, a new routine, and most importantly, a new family member, my stepbrother. His name was Daniel. He was quiet, mysterious, and the kind of person who kept most things to himself. We lived in the same house, ate at the same table, but we were never really close. At least, that's what I thought. Most days were normal. We barely talked except for small things like passing the salt at dinner or asking if someone had seen the TV remote. But sometimes I would notice strange things about him. He would disappear for hours without telling anyone where he was going. Sometimes I would catch him looking worried, like he was hiding something. Whenever I asked, he would just smile and say everything was fine. But deep down, I always felt like there was something he wasn't telling us. That night started like any other normal evening. I finished my homework, watched some videos, and eventually went to bed. The house was quiet. My mom and stepdad had already gone to sleep, and the hallway lights were off. Everything seemed peaceful, until that door slowly opened. Lying there in my bed, barely breathing, I tried to figure out who it was. My first thought was maybe my mom checking if I was asleep. But something felt different. The person standing near my door didn't move like my mom. The figure stood there for a few seconds, almost like they were thinking about something. Then I saw the silhouette clearly. It was my stepbrother. But the strange part wasn't just that he had entered my room in the middle of the night. It was the look on his face. Even in the dim light coming from the hallway, I could tell something was wrong. He looked nervous, almost scared. Like he had something important to say but didn't know how. My mind started racing with questions. Why was he here? Why in the middle of the night? And why did he look like he was about to reveal a secret he had been hiding for a long time? I sat up slowly, my voice shaking as I asked the one question that felt impossible to ignore. Daniel, what are you doing in my room? For a moment, he didn't answer. He just stood there, looking at me like he was deciding whether he should tell me the truth or walk away and pretend this moment never happened. Then he finally spoke. And what he said next was something I never expected to hear in my life. But before I tell you exactly what my stepbrother revealed that night, you need to know the truth about what had been happening in our house for weeks, the strange signs we all ignored, and the secret that was quietly growing behind closed doors. Because once you understand that part, you'll realize why that midnight moment was the beginning of a story none of us were prepared for. For a few seconds after he spoke, the room felt completely silent. I could hear the ticking of the clock on my wall and my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Daniel looked different that night. Not like the quiet stepbrother I was used to seeing at dinner every day. There was something serious in his eyes, something heavy that made it clear he didn't come into my room just to talk about something small. I remember thinking back to the first day we met. When my mom introduced us, he barely said a word. He just nodded politely and went back to his room. At the time, I thought he simply didn't like me. Living with a stepbrother who barely talked wasn't easy. We were like two strangers sharing the same house. But slowly, I started noticing little things about him. Daniel wasn't rude or mean. In fact, he was strangely protective sometimes. If someone at school ever bothered me, somehow he always found out. And even though he never said much, those problems would mysteriously disappear a few days later. Still, there were always things about him that didn't make sense. For example, he would sometimes leave the house late at night. Not often, but enough for me to notice. I once saw him quietly putting on his shoes near the front door when everyone else was asleep. When I asked him the next day where he went, he just shrugged and said he was taking a walk. But who takes long walks at 2 in the morning? Then there were the phone calls. Sometimes his phone would ring, and he would instantly leave the room to answer it somewhere private. His voice would become serious, almost tense, like he was dealing with something important. Whenever I walked near his door, the conversation would suddenly stop. At first, I tried to ignore it. After all, families can be complicated, and step-families even more so. But deep down, the curiosity kept growing. And now here he was, standing in my room in the middle of the night. The hallway light behind him cast a shadow across the floor, and I could see his hands slightly shaking. That was the moment I realized something was truly wrong. Daniel wasn't the type of person who showed fear easily. "Listen," he finally said quietly, closing the door behind him. I didn't know who else to tell. That sentence alone made my stomach twist with anxiety. Why me? Out of everyone in the house, why did my stepbrother choose me to talk to in the middle of the night? Before I could even ask another question, he glanced toward the door again, almost like he was worried someone might hear us. Then he leaned a little closer and lowered his voice. "There's something going on in this house, something you haven't noticed yet." The way he said it made the air in the room feel colder. Because suddenly, all those strange things I had been noticing about Daniel didn't seem random anymore. For a moment I just stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. Something going on in the house. My mind immediately went through every normal explanation I could think of. Maybe he meant a problem between our parents. Maybe he had discovered something small and was just overthinking it. But the look on his face told me this was much bigger than that. I whispered, "What are you talking about?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He walked slowly to the window and pulled the curtain slightly to the side, peeking outside like he was checking if someone was there. That alone made my chest tighten. Our street was always quiet at night. There was rarely any movement outside after midnight. But the way he was acting made it feel like someone could be watching the house. When he turned back toward me, his voice was even lower than before. "Have you noticed anything strange lately? Anything at all?" At first I wanted to say no. But the truth was, there had been small things happening over the past few weeks. Things I ignored because they didn't seem important at the time. Like the night the lights in the hallway suddenly turned on by themselves. Or the afternoon when I came home from school and the front door was slightly open, even though everyone else was supposed to be at work. And then there was the one thing I never told anyone about. A few days ago, I thought I heard someone moving in the hallway late at night. When I opened my door to check, the hallway was empty, but the air felt strange, like someone had just been there seconds before. Daniel watched my expression carefully, almost like he could read the thoughts running through my head. "That's what I was afraid of," he said quietly. Now my mind was racing with questions. Was he imagining things? Or had he been noticing the same strange signs that I had? Because if we both felt something was wrong in the house, then maybe this wasn't just a coincidence anymore. Daniel slowly sat down on the chair near my desk, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to calm himself. I had never seen him like this before. Usually he was quiet but confident, the kind of person who always looked like he had things under control. But tonight, something had clearly shaken him. "I didn't want to believe it at first," he said quietly. "I thought maybe I was just imagining things." I leaned forward on my bed, trying to understand what he meant. The room suddenly felt smaller, and every tiny sound from the house made me more nervous. "What things?" I asked. He looked toward the door again before answering. "Someone has been coming here." My stomach dropped. "Coming here? To the house?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. "For the past 2 weeks, I've noticed signs. Small things at first. The back gate slightly open when it should be locked. Footprints near the garden after it rained. Lights turning on when no one was awake." As he spoke, every memory of the strange moments in the house started connecting in my mind like pieces of a puzzle. "But that's not the worst part," Daniel continued. The tension in the room grew heavier. I could tell he was about to say something important. "A few nights ago," he said, lowering his voice even more, "I heard someone walking in the hallway around 3 in the morning. My heart skipped a beat. I thought it was you or Mom," he added. "So I opened my door to check." I held my breath, waiting for what came next. "The hallway was empty," he said slowly. But I clearly heard footsteps, stopping right outside your door. A cold chill ran down my spine. Outside my door. I quickly looked toward it now, the same door Daniel had quietly opened just minutes ago. Suddenly, the floor in the hallway creaked. Both of us froze. Daniel's eyes locked onto the door. And then we heard it again. A slow, careful footstep moving right outside my room. The sound stopped both of us in our tracks. Daniel didn't move. I didn't move. For a few seconds, the entire house felt completely silent again, but it wasn't the normal quiet of nighttime. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like someone is listening, waiting. We both stared at the door. Another soft creak came from the hallway floor, the same kind of sound old wooden boards make when someone slowly shifts their weight. My throat felt dry. Daniel slowly stood up from the chair, his eyes never leaving the door handle. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. He nodded once. Now the fear that had been building inside the room suddenly felt real. All the strange things Daniel had mentioned, the footsteps, the lights, the open gate, no longer sounded like random coincidences. Someone could actually be outside my room. Daniel carefully stepped closer to the door, moving slowly like he didn't want the person outside to hear him. I could see the tension in his shoulders. For a moment it looked like he was about to open it. But then the footsteps stopped. Not faded away, just stopped. That was even worse. It meant whoever was out there might still be standing right outside. Daniel slowly leaned toward the door, listening closely. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The seconds felt painfully long. Then suddenly, the hallway light clicked off. The faint glow under my door disappeared, and the hallway outside was now completely dark. Daniel stepped back quickly. "Someone was definitely there," he whispered. My mind was racing with questions. If someone had been outside my room, why didn't they knock? Why turn off the light and disappear? But before either of us could say anything else, another thought hit me. "Wait," I said quietly. Daniel looked at me. "Mom and Dad went to bed hours ago, right?" "Yeah," he replied. "And you were already in your room before you came here?" He nodded again. A heavy silence filled the room as we both realized what that meant. If our parents were asleep, and Daniel had been inside my room this whole time, then the person walking in the hallway couldn't have been anyone from our family. Daniel slowly turned his head toward the window again, thinking. Then he said something that made the situation even more disturbing. "That means whoever was outside your door might still be inside the house." And just as those words left his mouth, a faint sound echoed from downstairs. The front door, slowly opening, the sound of the front door opening echoed faintly through the quiet house. Daniel and I looked at each other at the exact same moment. Neither of us said a word, but we both knew what we were thinking. Someone had just left, or someone had just come in. Daniel moved quickly to the door of my room and slowly opened it just enough to peek into the dark hallway. The light was still off, and the house looked completely still. For a moment it almost felt like we had imagined everything. "Stay here," he whispered. But there was no way I was staying alone in my room now. I quietly stepped behind him as we both walked into the hallway. Every step felt louder than it should have. The wooden floor creaked beneath our feet, and the darkness made everything feel unfamiliar. When we reached the stairs, Daniel paused and listened carefully. From downstairs we could hear the faint sound of movement near the front of the house. Someone was definitely there. He slowly walked down the stairs, and I followed right behind him, my heart pounding harder with every step. As we reached the bottom, we could finally see the front door slightly open. Cold night air was drifting inside. Daniel moved forward and pushed the door open wider. Outside, near the driveway, a shadowy figure was walking quickly away from the house. "Hey!" Daniel shouted. The person stopped for half a second, then ran toward the street and disappeared into the darkness before we could get a clear look. For a moment we just stood there, breathing heavily and trying to understand what had just happened. Then Daniel noticed something on the floor near the door. A small envelope. He picked it up slowly and turned it over. There was no name on the front, no address, nothing. "What is it?" I asked. Daniel carefully opened it, pulling out a folded piece of paper. His eyes moved across the words, and I could see the color slowly drain from his face. "What does it say?" I asked nervously. He hesitated before handing the paper to me. Written in simple black ink were only a few words. "I know what happened that night." My stomach twisted. "What night?" I whispered. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the dark street outside, like he was realizing something important. And that's when he finally said something that made this entire situation even more shocking. "That message," he said quietly. "It's not meant for you." He looked directly at me. "It's meant for me." For a few seconds I couldn't say anything. I just stared at Daniel, trying to understand what he meant. The cold night air was still coming through the open door, and the street outside was quiet again, like nothing had happened. "What night are they talking about?" I asked slowly. Daniel took a deep breath and closed the door behind us. His eyes moved around the living room like he was deciding how much he should tell me. The tension that had filled the house all night was still there, but now it felt different, like the truth was finally close. "A few weeks ago," he began quietly, "something strange happened when I was walking home late from a friend's place." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I took the shortcut behind the park," he said. "It was late, and the streetlights weren't very bright. While I was walking, I noticed someone standing near the fence. At first I thought they just needed directions or something." He paused for a moment, remembering the night. "But the person didn't speak. They just kept watching me. It felt off. Like they were studying me. I didn't want any trouble, so I just kept walking and came straight home." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "A few days later, I started noticing things around the house. The open gate, the footsteps, the strange feeling that someone had been nearby. That's when I started thinking the person from that night might have followed me. Suddenly everything started making sense. The late-night walks he took weren't random. He had been checking around the house, making sure nothing strange was happening. That's why he seemed so tense lately. But tonight," I said, "someone actually came inside." He nodded slowly. "Yeah. And now they've left that message." Daniel looked again at the piece of paper in my hand. "Whoever it was, they want me to remember that night, or they want me to think about it." The strange part was that the message didn't threaten us. It didn't ask for anything. It just reminded him of something mysterious. After a while, we locked the doors and checked the windows around the house. Everything seemed normal again. Our parents were still asleep upstairs, completely unaware of the strange midnight story that had just unfolded. Before we went back to our rooms, Daniel stopped in the hallway and looked at me. "Thanks for trusting me tonight," he said. That moment changed something between us. We weren't just stepbrother and step-sibling anymore, we were part of the same strange experience. Even now, we still don't know who that person was or why they left that message. But one thing is certain. Sometimes the quietest nights hide the biggest mysteries, and the truth doesn't always reveal itself right away.